In 1952, C.S. Lewis wrote these words: "Imagine yourself as a living house. And God comes in to rebuild that house, and at first, perhaps you can understand what He is doing. He's getting the drains right, and He's stopping the leaks in the roof, and so on. And you knew that those jobs needed doing, and so you are not surprised. But presently, He starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make any sense. What on earth is He up to? The explanation is that He is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. Throwing out a new wing here, putting an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards, and you thought you were being made into a decent little cottage. But He's building Himself a palace, and He intends to come and live in it Himself." The last several weeks at Invitation, we have been in this series called Kings and Kingdoms. And it's really challenged us with two questions. It's given us an opportunity for us to kind of answer once and for all, like who our King is, like who's the one that we honor, who's the one that we serve, who's the one that we worship, who's the one whose voice we listen to. And the second question, like what kingdom are our feet planted in? And we've given ourselves some time to answer that question, to not answer it too quickly, but to really do some deep reflection on that in our own life, because we can have all kinds of kings and we can live in all kinds of kingdoms. And as people who have chosen to follow Jesus, to live the Jesus way, to be carriers of His name in the world, to seek to bring light where there is darkness and peace where there is chaos and healing where there is pain, it's important that we come to terms with those questions. So we've looked at some of the Old Testament kings in the Bible, and so we've talked about King Saul, and we've talked about King David, and we're finishing up our conversation by talking about David's son Solomon. And there's basically 12 chapters in the Bible that are given to Solomon's story. And he's like us. He's complex. He has a heart that is divided. And on the one hand, he seeks to walk in faithfulness to God. On the other hand, he finds himself with his feet planted in the wrong kingdom. But towards the end of the account in the book of 1 Kings of Solomon and his life and what he was about, we see that he has finished building this temple, this house for God, this place where the presence of God is going to dwell, and a place where worship will take place. And it takes 7 years to build this temple. And at the end of the construction, Solomon lifts his hands toward heaven and he prays. And it's a 7-part prayer. It's not one of those quick little prayers that you do perhaps before a meal, or before you take a test, or before you have a hard conversation. It's a long prayer. He prays 7 things. He prays for justice, and he prays for God's provision. He prays for God's rescue. He prays for God's deliverance. He prays for outsiders. That His Spirit would fill not just the walls of the temple, but every square inch of land that exists outside of the temple. And join us this weekend as we seek to be people who live out that prayer. Not simply within 4 walls, but spilling out into all of the corners of the earth, for the sake of the name of Jesus.